what what I'm here to talk about today is PowerFx command buttons and the actions that we can do with them. Thank you, Kylie, for the introduction. I am the president of Excellent Solutions, 7-time business application MVP. Historically been a developer with CRM and Power Platform. I also work as a consultant and architect. I love doing the chapter work that we do here, but it's also my day job. I work with small, medium businesses. So if you have any, technical challenges or something that you can't quite get right, please reach out, and I'd love to talk with you about it. So, like I said, we're here to talk about the command bar, and these are the actions that are available in model-driven apps. So if you have a background with CRM or Dynamics 365, you're familiar with these. These are all out-of-the-box buttons, and we've been able to add buttons for a long time, right? You can do things like with the buttons, you can do things like creating and updating records, triggering workflows, all kinds of stuff. But the problem's been that it's always been kind of a pain to build them. What I'm showing here is what Microsoft expects us to do to edit the buttons. This is the XML, and so you'd have to export solution, edit this by hand, re-import it, and it's a lot. It does give us a good look at some of the components that go into building a button, though. We have display rules for when it should show, enable rules. They were different things in the past. You tie your rules to a command. A command has some actions, and then you tie it with a button. And actually, one of the first times I built a button, it was with the XML, and I spent all day doing it, and I showed my girlfriend at the time, and she was not very impressed that I spent all day adding a button to a form. But I was very proud of it because it's a lot of work. Fortunately, the community, as it does, built a tool to make this easier. And it is easier. It put a nice interface over the XML editor that we had. And so it helps group those display rules and enable rules and commands. But, we're still kind of working within the framework of that XML. So you still have to create your display rules and enable rules. It's not intuitive. And the kind of worst part of it, for lack of a better word, is the actions always end up having to call JavaScript. And that can be a problem when you have, when you're trying to schedule development resources, if you don't have great practice around source control, down the line, whoever the developer is may have left, or whatever the case, it just ends up being a lot, and it's a lot more work than it really needs to be. This is just an example of simple JavaScript to deactivate a record, where we have to get the context, set some values on the form, save the record, throw an alert if it's not there. So after 12 years of using the Ribbon Workbench, which is not to take away from it, fantastic tool. But eventually Microsoft addressed it by building a new command editor. And this is a tool built by Microsoft, and it runs in the product, so you don't have to install anything else. It's a low-code tool. It's not no-code, and we'll kind of talk about that a little bit. But it lets you create buttons, define the visibility of those buttons, and the behavior of what happens using PowerFx instead of proprietary rules and JavaScript to actually do the behavior. So the behaviors can use PowerFx, but you can also use JavaScript. You don't have, you don't have to be shoehorned into one, and you can switch it from one to the other after you create your button. But the big limitation right now is that you can't use this editor for existing buttons or system buttons. You have to still kind of edit it using the Ribbon Workbench technique. However, for new buttons, I highly recommend going about working with them in this way. And that's what we're going to do today. So all of my scenarios today are going to kind of work through the same, same hypothetical. I have an organization that processes applications, really simple applications. My application only has, we take applications, to get rid of this one. We have compacts, we have applications, and our applications have requirements. So let me edit these. It's from one of my run-throughs earlier. So pretty straightforward. And we're going to walk through a couple of scenarios about how we can address challenges that come up from my users. Now, in the examples I'm going to use, there are lots of ways to solve the problems, but what I want to do is illustrate different ways that we can use the buttons, and so that's what where the focus is. So first challenge, when our staff gets these applications, if they want to approve it, they deactivate the record and they pick the right status. And there's a bunch of statuses. And one of the complaints that our team is giving is that they just use the default status, or they pick the wrong one and deactivate it. So we just want to add a button to approve or reject the applications. So, nice and easy. To do this, we'll go to our solution for the editor, and you can edit these from the application. So go in and edit our app. Now, to use the new command editor, you'll want to go to the table that you want to edit. So we'll do it for applications, and there's a new option to edit the command bar. So we'll select that, and then it asks us, where do we want to add our button? And this time we want it to be at the top of the application, so we'll select main form. And this is what the new editor looks like. Really clean, shows all the existing buttons and the properties for them. So like I said at the top, we can't edit the existing buttons, but this is a really easy way to add new ones. And ultimately, at some point, we'll be able to edit these as well. So you can add new commands, which is a typical button drop downs or split buttons. We're just going to do it with commands. If we were creating a JavaScript button, you have that option. You can pick your library, but I'm going to pick PowerFx because we're doing it low code today. So the first time we create a new PowerFx button, it's going to, it takes a minute. It's actually doing some things behind the scenes on creating some artifacts about or where it's going to store these expressions that we're going to build. So that's done. Let's drag our button over to the, we'll put it where it was, right there. So the label for our button is going to be approve. We can pick an icon using one of the existing ones, or we can upload. So we'll go with the check mark for that. And I'm going to add another one to reject. Those are the two big ones we use most of the time. So an X mark. So I'm not going to build out reject. We're just going to look at approve. To edit, so to edit the action it takes, we go to the action area and open the formula bar, and we have this available at the top. So for our folks on the call who are familiar with Canvas apps, This is PowerFx, which is the same language that you use within Canvas apps to make it do stuff. There are some limitations between the PowerFx buttons, or the commanding for the PowerFx buttons versus what you can do in the Power Apps. There are a handful of functions that are not supported, and that's just due to the nature of, with Canvas apps, like you have variables that are shared across the application, whereas with buttons, that's not really the case. So some things that aren't supported, but if you're comfortable with PowerFx, then you should be able to get started with this pretty quickly. If you're not, this is similar to Excel expressions. So what we're going to do in this case to change the status of the record is do a patch. And here, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Do a patch, and we'll say we're going to update the applications table. The record that we're going to update is this item, and then we tell it which fields we want to set on our record. So we care about the status, of the application, and we're going to set the status to inactive, and we're going to set the status reason to, sorry, get the spacing down. The hardest time with this editor for some reason. Set it to inactive and approved. So we'll save and publish this. That's all we did. It took us 3 minutes to get that set up. So again, the publishing is typically pretty quick. The first time through, it'll take another, take an extra minute or two. But when this publishes, we'll come in and play our app. Go to our application. And we'll get this pop-up. A new version of the app is available. Please refresh to update. So we're gonna do a lot of refreshing on this browser, and I'll get into why in a few moments. But we have our application, we have our new approve and reject buttons, and if we hit approve, we see our record's been approved, and that's it. So we don't have to deactivate and select the status anymore. So so nice, right? We got rid of that first problem. But now 2 more come from that. The first one, it's not really obvious that anything happened here. We do have the gray bar, but it's, we need something a little more in your face. Another weird thing is that this approve button is still showing even though it's already approved. So we want to change the visibility of our button to only if it's active. So we'll come back in. And for the visibility, the default is show, but we can set a PowerFx expression for the visibility of that. So we want to run only when our item status is every time. Only when our status is active. So what this is going to do is check the status of our current record and compare it to active, and that's when it will be visible. Second thing that we want to do to make it a little more obvious that something happened is add a second command here to do a notification. And so what this will be is a pop-up for our user saying that the thing was successful. So we can chain together multiple expressions using a semicolon, right? Just like if you're writing code in .NET. So if we want to pop up a notification on the screen, we can just use the notify expression. So we'll say the application has been approved, and we're very excited about that. Next property is the notification type. So if we look at some of those options, it can be error, information, warning, or success, and this is a success. And then optionally, we have a third parameter for a timeout. So I'm going to set this, and what that timeout's for is when this notification bar should auto hide. So this is in milliseconds, so we just set that for 6 seconds. So now this is kind of neat too. Again, notice that it's still publishing parts of the application. So we'll refresh, get our notification, and refresh again in a moment. There we go. Okay, so our approve button is no longer there since our record's approved, which is great. So if we reactivate it, we would expect to see it, which we do. So really great, we managed the visibility of the button, and if we hit it, hopefully we'll get a nice message that the application's been approved. So, so we're giving that more obvious feedback to our user, and then 6 seconds later, it clears out. So, kind of nice, still at this point, I think still trivial examples. However, even building this 2 years ago would have taken, at least an hour. So this is great, right? Everybody's using it, everybody's happy with it. And new set of challenges where I say, yeah, that's great and all, but the buttons are too close together. This is actually worse than before because it's so easy to click the wrong thing. And we don't have any kind of recourse except to reactivate and close it. But by that point, the emails have gone out and all these problems. So what we can do now, and what we're going to take a look at, is using a custom confirmation dialog to tell the person what's going to happen and give them the opportunity to confirm or cancel out of the process. So I'm going to leave this the button editor for a moment and go back to our solution. If we look at our solution now, there's this new item that's just been added behind the scenes, and this is a command library. And this is where all of the commands for our buttons in the app live. When we're building these command buttons, they are tied to a specific application. So it's not like traditional buttons where they live on the form. In this case, they live, on the component on the app. So you can come in directly into the component library and edit the buttons this way. And I alluded to it being similar to Canvas apps. If you come into it this way, it's really obvious that it's Canvas apps. Oh, sorry, gotta close out of my buttons here before it lets me edit this. Yeah, so what we see here is the Canvas app editor. All of our buttons are going to be listed on the right-hand side, and we can go about editing them. So the thing that's it's kind of a mixed bag, which editor to use, in my experience. You can only add new buttons, as far as I know. You can only add new buttons and get them in the right place using the button editor screen that we started with. However, it's not quite as good as an editor as the Canvas app editor. And the big reason why is because of this simple sliding text area. So if you're working on really complex items, you might want to do it here after you add your buttons. There are some other benefits, like I think the IntelliSense, kind of like the hint text, I think is much better for in this tool as well. But talking about confirmations, the way that we would do that, I'm just going to take all the stuff we already built, put that off on the side for a minute. Now let's talk about confirmations. These are dialogs that pop up in our app. And first parameter is the message that we want to do. So this will be very sure you want to approve the application. And then we can specify what our two buttons are going to say. I had to go to the documentation for this. It would be nice if it was kind of more helpful, but you know, as it is, this is kind of what we're working with. So this is our confirmation. We set our properties for the confirm button and the cancel button. It is really good at telling you when you screw up. It doesn't tell you what, but it does tell you that something's wrong. So I've learned to always listen to that. Now this confirmation expression, this is going to return a true or a false based on if they've clicked the confirm or the cancel. So what we can do is take an if expression, and just like Excel, you know, surround the whole thing with an if. So now this will be our evaluator, and we can describe what to do if they say yes, confirm. And for us, it's going to be the same thing as before. It'll be an update to our application. We're going to throw up that notification record. And then if they hit cancel, we're not going to do anything. So just open brackets, open and close brackets, format this a little bit. So kind of our three parts now is our if, our true part, and then our false part. So we'll save and publish this. And give this a minute to run. All right, so let's try this. Hopefully it's taken. Oh, there we go. Let's try it a third time. Hopefully this is taken now. And if we approve, we've got our dialog, which is great. We can say no and back out of it, or we can continue on and get all the same behaviors that we had before. So, you know, now we're chaining together, again, nothing complex to build, but we're building functionality, which would be, you know, take a lot more time using traditional development means. So before building more stuff, I want to show something you may or may not have seen, but it's a new button in the ribbon when you come into it this way, called the command checker. And you can actually just make this available yourself by adding this ribbon debug equals true in the query string parameter. And what this command checker does is it's great for troubleshooting buttons. And this does work with any, you know, the ribbon workbench buttons, the out of the box ones. It's really, really cool for showing you, you know, why something is either hidden or shown. And then to a lesser extent, what'll happen once you click the button. So if we look at like the mark complete button, yes, it would be enabled for these reasons. However, it's not an activity and you can't, you know, whatever, it doesn't match this other rule. So really, really great for troubleshooting. Now, what's really cool, I think, is when we look at our command properties, the reason that I have to keep refreshing when it says a new version of the app is available, and then the reason that we have to refresh is when we hit our publish button, it's actually taking this PowerFx expression and converting that into JavaScript, and that JavaScript is what actually runs in our application, right? So the visibility and behavior of the approve button is actually based on JavaScript. And we can see that in the command checker by looking at our action. So it's an expression, we get to see details about what properties it looks at. But down at the bottom, we have this section for compiled script. So I'll pull that out. I'll just take a look at this. And this is what actually happens on our button. If we look for things like approve, right, we can kind of see it's not fancy formatted, but are you sure you want to approve the application? Here's the confirm button. Here's our 6-second timeout. So it's really, really cool kind of, even if this isn't necessarily helpful, even if it's not necessarily easy to consume, it still kind of lets you see what's going on. And so if you're looking for specific changes, and if you're not sure if something got published or it's out there, this is one way to see kind of what's running when you click that button. So that was the command checker and getting our confirmation set up. So this is great. We have our applications, they're approved, everybody's happy. Now my staff says, the next thing that we need to do is, after it's approved, we need to create an application for next year. This is their 2023 app. They're done. Everything is everything's been updated. But now I have to go and create a new application, set the new due date, recreate the requirements, and it's a pain. So we can add a button to clone this application. And again, this is one of those things where, there's 100 ways to do this, but we're going to do it with a button. So let's come in. We'll get out of our editor because we can only have one open at a time. Get back into our classic editor, our classic button editor, rather. And so this is where it can get a little tedious because we want to add a button here, but we're going to use a lot of text. So let's add the button here and then switch back to the other editor, and it can be a little tedious at times. So I think once they kind of unify this experience, it'll be a lot better. Essentially just make this bigger. So we use an icon to copy. There we go. That works. So one tip that I would recommend is renaming your buttons after you create them. It's pretty easy to keep track of them here because you can see approve, reject, and copy. But it's easy to rename them. So, as your app and your buttons get, as you add more and more functionality, you might end up with 15 approved buttons. So this might be, approve on the application form. And you'd want to do that just for good housekeeping. But let's get to our copy. So for this application, we want this button to show up only after it's been approved. We'll copy the application, we'll keep the contact, make the due date next year, same date, but 1 year out. Then we'll copy the requirements and make sure that these are set to no, that they're not satisfied yet. So, we'll start with the visibility for that. That's nice and easy. So we'll say if this record if it's approved, then we want that visibility to go. We'll switch to our select. One of the limitations with PowerFx with the command buttons is variables work differently. If you're building a Canvas app, you can use a set expression to set a variable, and that kind of lives within your application there. But like we talked about with buttons, the context of the commanding in the buttons has to be on that button. So we have to do that a little bit differently, and we can use the with expression to create kind of like variables that only live within the scope of this button. So we can use that with expression to create our application and then iterate over the child records to clone those out. So for the with, the first part is our scope, and those are going to be the variables that we need to create. And so our first variable or only variable is going to be the application record, right? So we want to create our applications, and then going to create an application with the default values. And the values that we're going to set on our new application, we're going to carry the name over to. Sorry, I've had the hardest time typing today. Item name. The contact is going to be same thing. This way, Mike can get his membership back again. And we're going to set a due date for it. So the due date is 12/31/23. We want the same date, but 1 year out. So we can use the date add expression for that. So we'll add, our starting point is going to be due date. That's what I was talking about, the help text. I think it's just really easy. So it tells you like the enumerated values that you can use. Time unit dot years is the one that we're looking for. And usually you can guess and figure it out pretty quickly, but it's nice just having it here so you don't have to guess as much, at least. All right, so that's our width. That's our scope. We're going to create this application. We're going to hold on to it in memory for a minute. And then our formula is what we want to do after that. So it's going to be a patch, which is, our creates and updates. And we're going to do it over the requirements table. Have this for a second. No, that's the closing one there. That. Go. Let's try formatting this. Okay, that looks pretty. So now we want to create our child records. So it's going to be a patch on our requirements. want to save this. Okay. All right, we're going to push ahead. Patch on the requirements, and we're going to do a for all. And what that is we're creating a loop over our related requirements, our child records. So for each requirement, we'll give that a local variable name, and we're going to do an inner patch as well. So the reason that we have it set up this way, sorry, it's a little challenging to type and talk at the same time. And set the name of our child requirement, set the application to our, nope, that's wrong. It's going to be our application that we created up at the top. So we created our main application, we're creating our child record. The reason that we have it loop this way, like why do we have that outer patch? And it's actually for better performance within the application. And I'll show why in a moment. So now this should update all of our copy our record, create all the child applications. We can make it a little cooler by navigating to our new application record, right? Nice and easy, navigate to the application. And then from here, let's do a notify. And say the application's been copied. And that will be information. All right, so lots going on here. But we talk about having it as a low code tool. I think that's a good kind of illustration of that, right? There's definitely, like, if you ask somebody off the street, they would say this is code, but it doesn't come with a lot of the same trappings that JavaScript or .NET certainly come with. So I think the barrier to entry is a lot lower than traditional code, but it's not something, it's not to the point where you can just drag and drop everything. So let's see how this goes. So we're going to try and copy our application. We've got our new application record. The due date's been pushed out. We have our default status. These are not satisfied, and we've got the notification. So everything worked great for the first time, which is unexpected, and always great to see. So we'll do two more quick examples, and then see if there's any time for questions. So the next one I want to show is, another scenario. I want to show bulk updating records. So we have our requirements, and the staff say, hey, this is all great. I still have a problem though. I keep clicking the wrong thing or filling in, overwriting the wrong field when I want to set these to satisfied. So, let's take away the bulk edit ability for our users and just make that easier, right? We don't need them editing everything from the requirements. We just need them to say that these have been satisfied. So let's do a button for that. So in this case, we're going to go edit our requirements table. It's going to be the subgrid view since we care about it from the form. We'll add a new command button to say mark satisfied. What I love about this example is that there are lots of ways that bulk edit can go wrong. It bypasses client-side scripting and validation. So, if you have JavaScript that hides or shows fields or marks fields as required, all of that is just give it a check. All of that disappears once you do bulk edit, because you can't apply single form JavaScript to a list of records. So this is great because we can effectively disable the bulk edit when we have simple scenarios like this, and so it can just kind of keep people from causing issues that then cause issues for us to come in and fix it. So our action here is going to be pretty similar to what we did before. In this case, it's going to be a patch because we're doing updates. It's going to be on the requirements table. Again, it'll be a for all of self-selected, and we're going to do all items. So this is a little different from before. Everywhere else I was doing item because we're dealing with the main record. But here we're dealing with a list of records. So we're going to do our patch, iterate, and patch. And again, I'll point out as this runs why that's a good thing. So we're going to update the requirements table, pass in our variable for our current requirement. And we're going to update some values on it. We're going to set it to satisfied. True. And see if it likes that or not. Oh, it doesn't like that at all. I'm sure I'm just missing a bracket somewhere, but I did go through this earlier and have some working code samples. Patch requirements for all. All right, well, it doesn't like this. We only have a handful of minutes left, so I'm not going to dig into it. I'll show you on a completed app that I did. Sorry, again, to this one, where they're not satisfied. You see it's not shown until we select some records, and then we can mark it as satisfied, and that updates our form. I'm going to do this again. I'm going to do a bulk edit. And there's something I want you to pay attention to. When I click it this time, you'll see these labels start to change, and then the entire form refreshes. So it happened pretty quickly. That was kind of smooth. And the reason why it worked well and was smooth is because we have this kind of embedded patch structure. So we could kill this outer patch and just have a for all loop going through the selected items. But what that does in practice is it updates this record and then refreshes the form, then updates the second record, refreshes again, updates the third, refreshes. And so you kind of get this, it's not obvious, but when you see it, you can tell that something's not quite right. And so it's just kind of, it's not as smooth as it can be. And so having that having the stacked patches is a better way to deal with that. So now I'm going to show the last example, which I think is really cool. This is going to be editing or kicking off a flow from a button. And the scenario that we have is, one that I do 300 times a day, which is one-time passcodes. So, again, we get a call. My folks get a call from somebody. They have some questions, but we need to verify their identity first. And the easiest way to do that is send the code to their mobile phone. So I've got I have a flow set up. It's pretty simple. Oh, sorry, wrong one. So this flow will run on update of the contact record, and I added a field for one-time passcode. So this field, normally would be hidden, but for our demo purposes, I have this on the form. So this runs when when that one-time pass field is set. Just listens for when the contact is modified. Uses a Twilio account to send myself a text message, and then clears out that field from the contact. So if we want to send a one-time pass to our user, what we can do is come in and edit our contact to build a button to do that. Our main form. No, new. Everything's checkmark today. So this is going to be our send one-time pass. Our action is setting that value on the contact. But we need to verify it, and they could just look at the field, but that's not as cool. So let's go. Let's see, on select, we will use our width to create a variable. Our variable is going to be called passcode, and we're going to set that to a random number between 100,000 and 1 million. That's our variable. That's our scope. We're going to update our record, and so we can do a patch on contacts. The record that we're going to update is our current contact. And we're going to update the one-time pass code based on the one that we just generated. So that's our patch statement. Easy peasy. And then let's show it back to the user. The passcode and the notification type will be warning. And we don't want to put a timeout on this one because it might take a little while for the user to get that text message. Let's try this now. So let's try send one-time pass. And let me refresh. All right, so we can see our notification bar shows the passcode was sent. Yeah, it has the value on the form too. What's really cool is that that update actually took place immediately on the form. And then if my screen's sharing, you can see that actually text came through already. So, kind of a cheap, quick way to build a passcode verification. We did it in all of 3 minutes. And, without writing any traditional code. So I think, again, a lot of these examples were kind of trivial, but I think they show how we can chain together some of these actions to really do cool, powerful stuff quickly and without having to worry about traditional overhead of, not just building the buttons, but then making them do what we want. So that was everything that I wanted to show today. And I'd like to open it up if there were any questions. Sorry, I wasn't monitoring the chat, but yeah, if anybody has any questions or comments, feel free to come off mute or yeah, anything.